makes it awesome. All right, I should be live here. Hello, everyone. My name is Neil here from EDM Tips. This week, we're going to be meeting live on YouTube for one of the first times in a while to review track submissions from members of our Radio Ready program in the EDM Tips Accelerator. We'll be back here every single week on Tuesday at this time to make sure that we're getting as much review as possible, help you guys grow your music as quickly as can be. And all you need to do to get feedback on your tracks is to be enrolled in either the Radio Ready program or the EDM Tips Accelerator. You can find information about those courses via the link in the comments right below this video. And if you're ever interested in learning more about it, please don't hesitate to reach out to one of us at EDM Tips. We'd be happy to set up a call and just chat and find out if it's a good fit for you. The way this stream works is, I'm going to share my screen in just a second, and we're going to go track by track through these submissions, and I'll be providing my feedback live and on the spot here. So get ready for a great session here. Let me just make sure that I've got this sent to our core community so that the folks that are usually watching this on Facebook can now see this on YouTube. And then we should be good to go. So give me just 1/2 second here. Share my screen, and then we will get into it. All right, just sent that out. Let me share my screen. And you guys should be able to see something in just a 1/2 second. There we go. And let's just resize that. Cool. All right, sweet. So yeah, let's go ahead and get into it right now. We've got a track submission. The first one's coming up from Jeff Wyckoff, who's coming out of our EDM Tips Accelerator program. He's looking for some feedback, specifically saying, really loving the drum build-up in this. Used inspiration from Lane 8, and I think the overall production of this track is great. I'm not a huge fan of my lead progression in the final 2 minutes of the song. Was hoping we could listen to the first drop, and then how you might change the notes of the lead to sound less cheesy. Thanks, Neil. All right, so yeah, let's see what we got here with Take Your Time by Mr. Jeff Wyckoff. For those of you watching, as usual, if you don't mind letting me know if you can indeed hear my voice over the music. I try to get these levels right, but it changes sometimes from stream to stream. So just let me know if you have trouble hearing my voice, and I'll bump down the volume of the music just a little bit. Good start to this track here, Jeff. Nice textures in your percussion and your drum layers. They're standing out nicely from this really distant atmosphere that you've created. So good job with those chords too. So I know you're looking more for feedback on the kind of tail end of the song, but just something to help in the meantime. This main kind of melody that you have going on right now would sound really nice with a little bit of added airy atmosphere. One of the best ways to achieve that is going to be using a plate reverb on it. That's going to bring out a lot of extra brightness, a lot of extra shimmer, and let that really cut through the mix just a little bit more and add a nice sense of airiness to the overall track. Let's check out this first drop, and then we'll jump ahead kind of to the second. I'm liking this melody so far. I don't know that I'd go so far as to call it cheesy. It does feel a little bit unresolved right now because we're playing that dun 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 dun, and we're not quite making our way back to the root note with each with each new phrase. So either add one more note at the end that just brings us right back to the root note, so we get like a da 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 each time, or even every once in a while. That's going to help just kind of put a close or a finale to this melodic phrase. As kind of an aside, something else that's going to help with this track, the hi-hats in the drum are just a little bit too thick and a little bit too long-tailed. And what that's doing is that's keeping us from getting as much separation between each hit and as much groove as we could be getting. So if you go into your sampler or whatever's driving those hi-hats and just kind of tighten up the tail end of all of those hits, you should end up with a little bit more energy, a little bit more space for the other elements like the melody, the top end atmospheres, and all of that other stuff to cut through the mix as well. Right here, I think the notes that you've chosen are working well. The sound selection is spot on. I would like a little bit more separation time-wise between the bass line and the melody. So right now, the notes are playing together when they play. If you just shift those bass notes over to, a 16th note to the right, or just kind of fit in between the pocket of those melodic notes just a little bit more, you should get this really nice sense of groove and movement. One thing I want to call out in the chat is that John likes the non-resolution of the melody. So like I said, there's nothing wrong with this melody to begin with. You clearly have some people liking it in the chat, so you probably are fine just leaving it as is too. One other opportunity that you have related to the percussion going on here is just creating a little bit more stereo separation among your elements. They don't necessarily need to be pushed to the far sides, but getting them out of just the core center as a whole is going to create a little bit, again, more space, a little bit more clarity, and separation for those elements. Awesome. All right, Jeff, really nice track here. Let's give it up for Jeff with Take Your Time, the master draft there. Up next, we've got a submission coming from Maxwell Young, also coming out of our Accelerator program. He's saying, this time around, I tried my hand at a minimal techno track. I'm looking for overall feedback, especially sound selection, and also wondering if the track sounds too busy or if it has too many elements, or not enough going on. I've been practicing being creative with stereo image as well. The breakdown starts at about 2:30, and if time permits, please jump to the 5-minute mark, as that is where the track has the most energy. Thank you. All right, yeah, let's see what we've got with Cubed. We'll start right around that 2:30 mark. Just a touch. Nice vibe here, good groove. So, I think what I want in this moment is just a little bit more motion of some sorts. Whether that's, in the sound design of the pad giving us a little bit more evolution, the sound design of this main, kind of sequencer R player, again, giving us just a little bit of a morph or a change in the sound every once in a while. Or even something as simple as automating up a little bit of extra reverb washout up and down, just kind of over time throughout the mix there. Oh, start at the beginning, you're asking. Okay, so yeah, let me start at the beginning here, Max, and see what we got. Great groove to start, good sample selection in that kick. I think the percussion are just a little bit too quiet, so I would just bring up the volume of your clap, that hi-hat, and everything else until it's just really sitting in front of the mix here. I like the groove of the bass line against the kick. That's sitting in the pocket really nicely. I think I find myself wanting just a little bit more rhythmic variation at some point, just because we're getting that same rhythm from measure to measure. Maybe every 4 or 8 measures, just switch it up a little bit on the tail end so that we get a little bit more variation, a little bit more of a turnaround moment at those times. That top end synth that just came in is really nice there too. I think I'd like a little bit more OTT on your pad layers to help, thin them out, add a little bit of extra airiness, and bring out some of the top end texture for this track. Yeah, I would agree with Slayer Dark Raver in the chat here. More body on the claps, perhaps some delay hits on there every once in a while too would be nice. All right, let's jump ahead to that 5-minute mark and see what's going on there. That new melody that you just brought in is really nice. I would bring that up in volume, saturation, and bring out a little bit of high-end coloring EQ boost to it to help really make it shine. And the coloring analog modeled EQ is going to be important there because it's going to risk getting brittle if you just use a transparent EQ to boost that as much as we need. I like that wide synth effect. I might take out a little bit of the low mids of that fluttery synth that just kind of came in. It's creating just a tiny bit of overlap with the top end of the bass there, and I'm not sure that we need that sense of body for that kind of effect there. I'd say everything else is working out here. The number one thing you can do is really bring those percussion and claps, really straight to the front of the mix here, because that's going to drive a lot of the danciness and energy for this track. All right, let's give it up for Maxwell Suited with Cubed. Up next, we've got a track coming from Mad Matthew. That's Mr. Mats Westerbjork coming out of our EDM Tips Accelerator program. He's saying, hey, Neil, another update on the track I'm working on. I've tried to make advancements on the feedback from last week, so I'd love some feedback on the mixing and mastering. Is the track golden yet? Looking for that golden seal of approval. Awesome, Matt. Mats. Let's see what we got with Angelic Correlation. It's a really nice start to this track. Great ear candy textures, good sense of atmosphere still. That synth effect that came in might be just a touch too loud, so I would dial that back just a small amount. Ooh, that vocal and those delays sound really, really nice. Good clarity. Front end, good sense of space on the back end. Great work with the build up, the transition, and everything else of the sorts. Kick and the bass sound like phenomenal here in the drop. Touch more. Yeah, so the kick and the bass sound really, really nice. Your drums and percussion sound really great too. The one complaint that I have about this lead right now, or rather about the track right now, is about the lead, and the wide delay / reverb on it is just a little bit too dominant and a little bit too bright. So if you tighten that up, dial it back a little bit, and filter out some of the high end of those delay effects, you're going to end up with a lot cleaner of a sound here. You might be able to saturate your percussion just a little bit further to just drive it a little bit more thickness and energy. One other thing that I'm kind of noticing about this track is that there is a lot of information still in the center. So we have our drums, we have our bass, and and the core of the lead is still largely in the center of the mix. So if you can take one of those elements, whether it's the percussion, the lead, or the bass line, and add some stereo width to it in the sound design by just increasing the number of voices up to an even number away from the one voice, that should help out a decent amount in creating some extra clarity and punch in your mix. You are super close to golden here, though. I'd almost be inclined to still give you that little seal of approval. So nonetheless, make those small changes, Matt, and you should be in a really, really great spot. Awesome. Up next, we've got a track coming from Yaniv, also coming out of our Accelerator program. And it's just looking for some feedback on the break and the drop starting at around 220. So let's see what we got with Legendary. Love the sense of space in this moment. And the notes you've chosen for the piano, the sound you've chosen for the piano are all working super well as well. It might be worth trying out a very faint delay on that piano every once in a while, at least at the start of the break. Like if you want to fade that delay out by the time that the piano just plays its own solo section, then that's totally fine. But that could help fill out a little bit more of the space in between. Probably bring out the low end thump on those impacts just a little bit further here. And then try out just a touch of OTT on this main synth riff that's playing right now. That'll help shift the focus to a little bit more of the top end texture, the harmonics, and the timbre of the sound. Whereas right now it is focused just a little bit too much on the actual tonality. Alright, so this kick is sounding really, really nice. I want the bass line to come up a decent amount to kind of match the energy and power of the kick. Right now, everything kind of feels like it's sitting in a similar distance away from the listener, just a little bit far back. So, a couple of things to help with that. So in addition to bringing up the bass line, I'd like a little bit more presence and saturation on your main sequencer that's playing right now. Past that, the percussion, the hi-hats are a little bit too quiet, so I'd bring that up a decent amount in volume. Dial back some of the reverb that's on them as well. Compositionally, all the notes and everything that you've got are working really well. Good job with the filtering and kind of, rounding out of the energy at that moment too. So I really like the introduction of the piano playing that sequencer style notes as well. I think it comes in just a little bit too loud too quickly. So bring down the initial volume of those first notes and then ramp up to that full volume. Let's give it up for Yaniv here. Yaniv, just to kind of recap, the number one thing I think that you can do is bring up the bass line. Whoops. But let me pause. Yeah, bring up the bass line in your mix to help really fill out the low mids, and then saturate some of those, main present elements and dial back the reverb to really get things sitting in front of the mix. All right, up next, we've got a track coming from Paul Evans coming out of our Accelerator program, looking for just some general feedback. So let's see what we've got with Bowie Let's Dance remix. Oh, hey, Paul, I'm so sorry. If this is a remix of the classic Let's Dance track, unfortunately, I cannot play this on the live stream. YouTube and Facebook and these various content platforms are pretty quick to end up canceling the stream if we play, copyright protected music. So if you're watching this and you have a different song that you can submit that isn't a remix, by all means, feel free to do so. Or if you can tell me and prove to me somehow that you do have the rights to this vocal, like maybe you got it off Splice for all I know, then that's totally fine. But otherwise, I do have to withhold on this, just because we risk taking down the stream otherwise. All right, so I'll keep that queued up in case I see anything from you in the chat. But for now, we're going to go ahead and move ahead to John Holland. And John is coming out of our Accelerator program as well. He's saying, this is an attempt at a manual master following week 7 instructions. Just looking for some thoughts. 240 into the bass break, and then 445 into the final drop with piano and vocal. I'm in a piano mood this month, he says, so I feel that I turned down my reverb and delay bus and impact effects bus too much pre-master export. Okay, yeah, let's check that out, and I'll pay specific attention to the wetness levels of everything. So let's check out 240 into the bass break. Alright, nice vibing groove to start. The first thing I'm noticing is that we don't have a ton of separation among our elements in the mix. It feels like the limiting and the work that the master has done has kind of brought our background textures a little bit too forward. I'm not quite getting that, again, that separation that I'd be looking for. So one recommendation I have is to go into your mixing project, chuck a limiter on there just to push up the volume, and then rebalance everything within that so that you get kind of a perception of what the track is going to sound like once it goes through your full master chain. You'd ask specifically about the reverb and delay levels. Not gonna lie, I'm pretty happy with your reverb and delay levels right now, so you're probably okay in that regard. If you want to push it a little bit more, you do have the wiggle room for that, but I don't think that this track is too dry by any means. I do like this bass break. There is, and Matt's just dropped it in the chat here saying, it feels just a little bit mids heavy, and I think it's primarily coming from this bass line. There's a little bit of like a tonal buildup around like 400 to 600 hertz in that bass line. Might even be as high as like 800 hertz, but I would just go in with an EQ. You should see a little bit of a bump there, and just duck that back down a small bit. Yeah, John, I see you're saying that, the reverb and stuff was very wet on the piano and vocal before. Of any layers, like, those are the ones that could have a lot more and still be totally okay, just because those are pretty flexible elements with where they can sit. In this section, I do think the piano is just a little bit too dry, actually. It's not quite fitting the more trancey vibe of everything else. So feel free to push the reverb on that piano a little bit further. Same thing for the vocal, in all actuality, yeah. Now, the vocal is currently getting masked a decent amount in the mix, primarily because it's really focused on the low mid-tonality, and the upper end of the bass and the lower end of the percussion are actually covering that up a little bit. So I would add a little bit of stereo width to the vocal and try to bring out a little bit more top-end airiness to it. Another thing that could probably help is if you just dial back a little bit of the piano chords. So the high layer is really nice because it's sitting in its own place, but those piano chords are competing against the vocal notes just a little bit. All right, let's give it up for John Holland with Melons and Kiwis, La La La. Up next, I've got a track submission from Dark Menace. That's Mr. Mark coming out of our Radio Ready program. He's saying, hey Neil, hope you're well. Been working on this for a while and I'm in need of a fresh pair of ears, please. Any thoughts on the overall mix, transitions? It's been tough, and main drop, I think. Starts to give flavor to track style. 15 seconds is when the beat comes in. First drop at 1:15, main breakdown at 2, and key build at 3, and then main drop at 3:44. Yeah, let's just see what we got with some of these transitions in various sections here. Nice vibe, good sound selection from the start. I would like just a little bit more width on those strings to help really set the stage for how big our mix is going to end up being down the road. Nothing wrong with that initial transition into the beat. I think it's a, a nice kind of just finale of that string section, and then it gets straight into it. There's nothing like wrong with the groove, but I do think it could be a little bit more compelling if you take the shakers and just nudge them back a little bit so that we get a little bit of a lighter, looser feel. It almost feels just a tiny bit too driving for the vibe of the instrumentation that you have, which is really light, really flowy. This clap that's playing in here right now is a little bit too dry and has a little bit too much of a low-mid focus to it. So I'd either find a different clap sample or EQ it a little bit so that we get rid of some of the low mids. I don't really have any complaints with that transition either. It just, it gets straight into it, but the transition's still effective. I do think the bass is just a little bit lost in the mix, so a subtle bit more saturation on it to help thicken it up and maybe bring out some top-end harmonics would help out. Up to this breakdown section, a reverb washout across the entire track would be really nice, just to help really hint to the listener we're about to get into a lighter vibe. We're not going to have quite as much power and energy. All right, let's see what we've got with that build at 3 minutes. So far working nicely. Cool, so I think most of your composition there is working really nicely. One other thing that you can do to help just add a little bit of extra interest to this section is some formant shifting on the vocal over time, either formant shifting or pitching it up or down, something that just creates a little bit more evolution on that vocal. I think everything else is working well here. The strings might be just a tiny bit too loud relative to the other elements in the mix. So maybe just thin out the strings just a little bit with some OTT, a little bit more wetness and reverb as well to help push them further back. And then bring up that ARP layer, bring up that bass line just a little bit. Awesome. Let's give it up for Mark there. Up next, we've got a track submission from Mr. JR coming out of our Accelerator program, looking for feedback on mixing and arrangement. So let's see what we got with the Rhythm Girl. Nice little sense of atmosphere, good mixing so far. I'm wondering if this hi-hat on the kind of right channel is just a little bit rushed in the mix. If you just nudge that a tiny bit back to the right in your arrangement, that should help fit it in the pocket just a little bit more. So I think the top end of your kick is really nice, but it might be worth either layering in or unfiltering if you've cut it out, just bringing in some more low-end thump to this kick as well. You don't necessarily need to do it right away, but especially by the 15-second mark or so, the crowd's going to be wanting that thump in there. Really cool sense of space, great textures going on here. Great groove going on here. I think these vocals are a little bit too loud, particularly the reverb on it is a little bit too loud. So I would just dial that back a little bit and bring up your piano just a little bit more. The reason for this is the piano, the kick and the bass are going to be what are really driving the groove, the danciness, and the motion. These vocals are more of an atmospheric vibe setting effect. So if they're too loud, they're going to be taking away from the danciness of the rest of the track. Agreed with John in the chat. Good transition though heading into that drop, and agreed with Tim. Nice groove going on right now for sure. I think the bass line is just a little bit lost in the mix, so I would bring that up a bit. But I also am wondering if the sound of the bass is a little bit too loose and kind of chorused out. Maybe consider just coming in with a tighter envelope sound for that bass and saturating it a little bit more, and that should help thicken it up and still maintain the groove. Finally, I'd like just a little bit more volume and saturation on your clap layer. Getting lost just a tiny bit in the mix. All right, fantastic work though, Jay. Let's give it up for him with Mr. JR with the rhythm. Up next, we got a track coming from Nevu side. That's Mr. Steve Smith coming out of our Accelerator program. Then, hey Neil, could you go from 255, please? Any general comments would be great. Thank you. Yeah, let's see what we got with Next to You. Steve, I've been digging this funky vibe that you've been playing with recently. I think right off the bat, the first thing I'm noticing is that there's a little too much like atmosphere and distance to this track, and not quite enough presence and thickness. So honestly, I think you could probably leave your atmospheres as is, but I want a little bit more presence on the bass line, a little bit more thickness, and then same thing for the drums. If you could tighten up their envelopes a little bit so they don't have quite as much tail end splash, and then are a little bit thicker with some saturation, that's going to give us a nice sense of presence and a couple of elements that are really going to drive the danciness of this track forward. Compositionally, this is working really well. The vocal in there is a really nice vibe, but it is a little bit too quiet and lost in the mix, so I would bring that up a decent amount. Great groove, great progression going on here. Nice little phaser throw there. Yeah, fantastic composition and writing here. Definitely bring that bass line up, let that drive just a little bit more. Really like that piano fill. I would saturate that piano just a little bit more, add some mid-range coloring EQ to add some body to it, and let that really, be a highlight of the track at that moment. The groove is spot on with this track, though. It's like impossible for me not to dance here. At this point, just to keep that kind of like horn layer interesting, maybe just filter out a subtle bit of the top end of it for a short bit, and then bring it right back in, but just a little bit more motion and variation on the top end of that trumpet layer would be nice. And I think lastly, I like just a little bit more side chaining on the bass line against the kick. I'm not necessarily getting build-up between the two, but I'm not getting the separation among them that I'd really be looking for. All right, let's give it up for Nevi Side with Next to You. Fantastic groove and vibe there. Up next, we've got a track submission from David Hadding coming out of our Accelerator program. He's looking for just some general feedback on the sound selection and sound design. So let's see what we got with Hat-Trick's Sounds of Shiva. Great vibe and sense of space from the start. Love that really distant atmosphere off to the right side. Good kick selection that's got a nice tight thump to it. The one thing that could help is a little bit more velocity variation in this hi-hat pattern so that it kind of goes up and down a little bit more. It sounds like you've got a little bit of variation in there, whether it's like through the sampler, through some velocity or something, but I think even more of that movement up and down would help. Love this new pluck that's coming in. It's a little bit too mid-range focused and a little bit thin. So it's saturated out a little bit more and then bring out some of the higher end frequencies with some coloring EQ lift to the high end. The reverb and delay on it might be just a tad bit wet. You could either dial back the wetness of it or just sidechain the reverb and delay against that lead pluck itself. So we get a little bit more presence on the initial pluck moments. I love the bass line that you have in there. It's sitting nice and wide in its own space, got a nice drive and groove to it. Fantastic work on that bass. In general, just a little bit more volume on your main like melodic lead pluck would also help out. Oh, I really like that percussion line that just came in. I think to make that even better, spread that nice and wide, either alternating left and right between those hits, or just set up a Haas effect on them so that they're kind of evenly wide on both sides. That's going to help free up a little bit more space for the melody that's currently in the center, and it'll differentiate it more from the hi-hats that you've got playing throughout. Really nice sound here. We definitely need to bring out some top-end airiness in there. So again, a coloring EQ lift to the high end, a tool like Fresh Air by Slate Digital. Either one of those would really work well to help bring out the top end of that like kind of horn-like sound. Now, in contrast to the other lead, I actually feel that this particular sound is a little bit dry with reverb and delay. So maybe just up the wetness, but again, I would make sure that those reverbs and delays are sidechained against the lead itself. We don't want to push it far back in the mix, we just want to, enhance the sense of space in the gaps. John, I see your comment. I will have to just kind of see what time is looking like. If you submit it via the Tuneful Tuesday form, we might have time to get to you today for sure. All right, let's go ahead and give it up for David Hadding with Sounds of Shiva. Fantastic work. I know you were looking for feedback on your sound selection. I think your sound selection was spot on across the board. We just need to mix and process a couple of those layers a little bit differently. All right, up next, we've got a track submission from Steve coming out of our Radio Ready program, looking for some feedback on the vocals at around 3:30. So let's see what we got with Indian Summer. Oh, and we've got a couple more kind of comments here. So, hey, Neil, bit embarrassed about the bare bones nature of this, but can't let it get in the way of good feedback. Spot on, guys. No one ever needs to be embarrassed here. Even the most rough works of progress are more than welcome here for feedback. That's the whole point of this. So anyways, he's saying, I'm having trouble with the female vocals again, and this is most noticeable around the 330 mark. I'm using a multiband compressor from 975 Hz to 4500, and a bit less from 430 to 975. I also took out some of the resonant frequencies with the Ableton EQ8. Any suggestions, please? Also, if you have any other comments, I really welcome them. Thanks. Yeah, let's see what we got going on here. So around 330. Okay, so a couple of things right off the bat. Ignoring the vocals, we actually first need to look at our instrumentation. And one of the first things I'm noticing is that the instrumentation is sitting right in the center of the mix, which is where our vocals are going to be living. So if you can add some stereo processing to your guitar, probably not the bass because the vocal is so much higher than the bass, but the guitar. Trying to see if there's anything else in there. I think it really is just the guitar. If you can just spread that guitar super wide, that's going to open up a really nice pocket for the vocals in the center. Now, in terms of the vocal, getting it to shine a little bit, I'm going to actually take this back so we can hear it again. So right now, you have that multi-band compression from like 975 to 4500. I think that that's actually causing more of a problem than it is helping. So what I would do is from the 430, I would go from 430 up to like 1200 in the female vocal, because that's where those fundamental frequencies are really going to live. And I would compress that even more. Now for the high end above 2 kilohertz, I would actually bring that up, perhaps with some multi-band expansion, or just some coloring EQ, or again, the Fresh Air plugin by Slate Digital should help add some nice, airiness to it. Another thing that'll help out a lot is some degree of like reverb treatment, and I think a plate reverb with a pre-delay of around like 50 to 60 milliseconds is going to give this vocal a nice sense of shine, a nice sense of pop, and the tail end of that reverb is going to help kind of thicken it up and just fill in a little bit more space.
Waited so long,
really nice work with the harmony in between those two vocals, so that was balanced really nicely there. Yeah, really nice work here, Steve. I think you're closer than you're giving yourself credit for. Like I said, just bring on a little bit more in the top end airiness. Some reverb on those vocals will do wonders. And then honestly, the biggest thing that you're going to do is just by creating that space in the instrumental. So in addition to spreading that guitar nice and wide, it might also be worth just carving out a little bit of more EQ in like the probably 1K to 3K range to allow for both the male and female vocal to live. All right. Yeah, let's give it up for Steve there. Up next, we've got a track coming from Mr. G Dimension. That's Gordon coming out of our Radio Ready program, saying, "Hey, Neil, I just wanted, is this good enough to send to record labels, or what adjustments are needed before done, as I've never sent any before?" Awesome. Yeah, especially if it's one of the first time sending to a label, you want to make sure that your quality is as good as possible. In general, anytime you send to a label, you want to make sure your quality is good as possible. But, the whole bit about first impressions is a very real thing. So let's see what we got with Free Your Tribal Instincts. Nice sense of atmosphere from the start. You might be able to go a little bit wetter with the reverb from the very beginning, just to really create that sense of space and distance. The vocals are pretty much perfect as is, though. Good groove going on here. The kick has a nice low end thump to it. I am getting just a tiny bit of build up, right at around, I think it's like right around 90 hertz in this kick. So just go in with an EQ and just duck that range just a little bit. It might be as high as 110 hertz, but I'm pretty sure it's sitting closer to the 90 range. And just a little bit of EQ reduction in there is going to help free up some headroom and a little bit of space. I think the top end percussion that you have here would sound really nice with some width added to it. Not something that's absolutely necessary because it's not really competing against anything. It's just going to help create a stronger sense of atmosphere and space in the track if you have it wide. I completely agree with what Jono just dropped in the chat. I was actually about to make the same comment myself. I would like a little bit more bass line coming in, really once the full drum beat comes in there. I wasn't quite getting the weight and the drive that I wanted from this track. There's a little bit of bass there, and that's definitely helping. So I am I'm getting some tonal conflict in the notes of the lead and the notes of the vocal at this point. And this is something that you absolutely should fix before setting it into a label. Your best bet, because the vocal's already been, recorded and stuff, is probably going to be to just change the notes of your lead pluck so that they're matching the notes of the vocal. So I think the crowd noise is just a little bit too loud at this point. The lead vocal's fine, but those kind of like wide crowd players are just creating a little bit of muddiness and bringing the hard back wall a little bit. I think some of the reverb on these vocals at this point is also just a little bit too heavy. It's keeping our percussion from really cutting through, and same thing for the bass line, as much as we need them to really drive forward the danciness and energy of the track. All right, Gordon, really nice work with this one, though. Fantastic vibe, fantastic groove going on there. Yeah, let's give it up for Mr. G Dimension with Free Your Tribal Instincts. Up next, we've got a track submission from Mr. Dan Westlake, coming out of our Radio Ready program as well, and he's saying, got a very quick and rough mix, master, arrange, so just some general music ideas. Yeah, let's see what we got with Find a Friend by Westside Angel. If SoundCloud will let me play. Cool, there we go. Good little intro here. Jono, I am seeing your comments are for track submission currently on your honeymoon. Man, go enjoy your honeymoon. And you're saying it is for the competition. Unfortunately, if it is for the competition, I cannot give feedback on it. It's just going to create an unfair advantage to anyone who would have access to this stream. So I am going to have to withhold on giving you feedback if it is for the competition. Dan, fantastic work with the start and the groove going on here as usual. The vocal might be just a tiny bit present around like 4 kilohertz. I'm hearing just a little bit of like an upper mid-tonal buildup. Might also be happening around 2 kilohertz as well. So just go in with an EQ. You should see a couple spikes around those ranges and just some subtle reduction in that range to the track. Fantastic vibe, fantastic groove going on here, Dan. I'm wondering if you could get just a tiny bit more presence in these drums. It's kind of up to you, because if you do add some top-end EQ lift to them, it's going to increase the danciness, it's going to increase the energy of this track, but it's also going to take it away from a little bit more of that kind of chill club vibe. So if you want to maintain that chill club vibe, I'd say leave it as is. If you want to enhance the danciness of it, give us just a very subtle high-end coloring EQ boost to those drums. Done a good job of picking samples and sounds that all live in their own range. Like that filtered electric piano is sitting, nice in the low mids to the upper mids. The vocal sample is sitting right here up in the bright section, and the top end presence of it is actually largely living separate from the frequencies of your drum. So even though they're both in the center, I can hear both elements really, really clearly. The space to bring out the bass line just a little bit more, like half a decibel. Again, kind of up to you. It's going to increase the danciness, it's going to increase the energy, but at the risk of taking away from that kind of chiller, low-key club vibe. I'm going want to kind of go back on what I said about the drums earlier. I almost definitely think they would benefit from a little bit of a high-end EQ boost, even if you're wanting to maintain some of that, kind of chiller vibe. Especially when the vocal is singing, I am losing just a touch of the energy of the drums. Cool, Jono, I see what you just said in the chat. I'll be sure to cue that one up. All right, let's give it up for Mr. Dan Westlake with Find a Friend. Fantastic as always. Up next, we've got a track submission from Tim Eads coming out of our Radio Ready program, saying, I've reworked this from a stalled project from last year. In a bit of a hurry, still working on structure, 12-bar intro. Wanted to know if the gunshots, horses, hooves, and neighing is too cheesy. Just flung together and a quick run through Ozone 9 to make it playable. Awesome, yeah, let's see what we got going on with Muchos version H. Nice intro there. I think that the 12-bar intro actually works totally fine. I have no complaints with that. Now, the one problem I have is once everything comes in right here, getting just a little bit too much going on between the rhythm of this main pluck and the delay on that pluck, the rhythm of the piano. And the bass line isn't really creating a problem. It's because it's so sustained, but it's really like those two main elements. And then especially here, once this new kind of horn layer comes in. So I think once you have these melodic elements come in, the piano chords that you have playing from the start need to take a step back in their rhythm and in the presence of the mix, so that we really have one clear rhythm that we need to be focusing on, and everything else in there is just supporting it in the background. A little bit of delay and reverb on that horn layer would be nice, though. Oh, you're saying you haven't mixed it at all? Totally fine. Right there at 113, I got a moment of tonal conflict coming from the horn layer. I would just check to make sure that it's matching the notes of your high-end kind of synthy layer that's playing at this time, too. I don't think that those, horses, names, the gunshots, all that stuff is too cheesy. If you haven't heard the track by Fed Legrand, let me see. Let's see, what is the name of it? Looking up Bang Bang by Fed Legrand and 22 Bullets. Check out that song. It would be a great reference to know how you can use some of those Western sounds really creatively in a way that fit the vibe of the track and enhance it. But to be honest, I think you've done a pretty good job with what you've got there. All right. And then last but not least, let's go ahead and cue in this track submission from Mr. Jono Haddo here. See that, yeah, you've got this new one, and this one's not for the remix competition, so we should be good to go. Yeah, so Jono, let me know when I'm playing this if there's anything in particular you're looking for your feedback on. Otherwise, I'll just kind of get straight to it. Let's see what we got with this new idea. Mostly mixing feedback for sure. Good start. The hi-hats are sounding really nice and crisp. The kick is just a tiny bit too heavy, and I think it's coming from two things. So I think the length of the sample is just a little bit too long. We're not quite getting the separation between each new hit that I'd be looking for, so go in and tighten up the length of your kick drum just a little bit. Past that, I'm also getting a little bit of build-up at around like 80 to 100 hertz, so a small EQ dip in that range should help out. Consider as you bring in both the bass line and the piano together, I think it's totally acceptable to do that. But since you're filtering it from the bottom up, what we're drawn to in the piano is the low end textures, which is going to be competing with the top end of the bass. So consider, bring in the bass line as is, And then for the piano, maybe just do like a band pass filter introduction that starts from a little bit higher in the frequency range, just so that we maintain some separation between the piano and the bass line right from the start. Mark, indeed, you are a little bit late for yours. We did review it though, so you should be able to go back previous, you can watch this stream. It's going to be saved to the channel and everything, so you should be able to check out your feedback on your track. Great groove going on. I like the tightness and the kind of staccato nature of this piano at this moment. It might have been just a tiny bit loud in the mix at that time. And this one's not something you have to do, but I do think it'll help kind of fill out the track a little bit more. It's just increase our stereo width on this piano, just so it's really sitting off on its own on the sides there. Skip ahead to this kind of final drop, make sure there's nothing else. You could definitely bring out those claps a little bit more. The rest of your percussion are sounding like pretty much perfect, but the clap is just a little bit lost. So I would saturate that and bring it out just a tiny bit more. And actually, maybe instead of saturation, maybe some coloring EQ to lift the high end and a little bit of the upper mid range as well. Awesome. Yeah, that takes care of it, Jono. Fantastic work with this new idea. And guys, that brings us to the end of our list for today. So thank you very much for tuning in. I hope, as always, that you guys got a lot out of these streams. I always have an absolute blast writing them. You guys are improving your music so freaking quickly here. So shout out to everyone who submitted. Shout out to everyone who's taking part in the chat and just helping each other out. Again, for those of you watching, if you're interested in getting feedback on your tracks, all you need to do is be enrolled in either the Radio Ready program or our EDM Tips Accelerator program. You can find out more information about that in the link in the description of this video just below. And again, if you guys are interested at all or want to learn a little bit more about the program, don't hesitate to reach out to one of us at EDM Tips. We'd be happy to set up a completely free call with you just to kind of chat and see if it is a good fit and which program might be the best option for you. With that, guys, thank you for tuning in. I hope everyone has a phenomenal rest of your week ahead. I'll look forward to catching those of you who are already part of the EDM Tips group in our Facebook group. And yeah, until next time, guys, have a good one. Thanks very much.